Thanks, Amanda. All right. Hi, everyone, and welcome to the very first Bushwise Wild Insights webinar. We are so excited to have you guys here with us for the very first one of these today. The reason we've decided to start running these webinars is we've heard from a lot of our audience and current students and some of our alumni and people who are interested in Bushwise in general that they'd love to hear more about how to start a career in conservation, how to get involved in wildlife, what the kind of people who work in this industry are currently doing and how they manage to get into the roles that they're in. And so we get a lot of questions, whether it's through our social media or calls or just direct contacts from people. And so we thought, let's use some of the resources that we have to have conversations with people in conservation around the world. And so this very first one I'm very excited about because we interviewed Sophie Barrett. Unfortunately, she's not with us tonight to do this live, but it's because she's quite a busy woman, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that. Sophie is with Rhino Revolution, and she's based here in South Africa, in Hoedspruit, actually. She also is a trainer with Bushwise, so she's had a really interesting background. She came originally from the UK. She's actually a trained lawyer. So in this conversation, which she and I had a couple of weeks ago, we talk about how she got interested in conservation from a very different background and ended up coming over to South Africa and getting involved in conservation with endangered species and doing some research and how she sees conservation and wildlife as being an intrinsic part of our lives. And no matter what career you're in, how you could get involved in wildlife somehow. So just a bit of housekeeping from my side. We are going to take questions through the Q&A, which you can see at the bottom of your screen. And then I'll be around after the recording here to answer any questions. Sophie, even though she's not here, said she's very happy to answer questions afterwards, so I can field those through to her. And we can chat about anything that you're interested in. So just throw your questions in there. And I look forward to speaking with all of you directly a little bit afterwards. I hope you enjoy the video. All right, here we are.
So
hey, Sophie. Here we are. All right, Sophie Barrett. It is so exciting to chat to you. You and I have been talking about doing this for a while now.
Yeah, definitely.
And you know I already love you, so I'm excited to chat with you about your experience. And this is like a sneaky way for not just our Bushwise followers and people who are interested in conservation to learn more about you, but it's my own personal way of getting to know you a bit more. So I had to use Bushwise just for that.
Yeah, exactly. Perfect. That's what they're there for.
Well, maybe we should just start by, let me give you a second to just introduce yourself, who you are, where you're from, where you are right now.
Okay, so hi everyone. As Annie said, my name is Sophie. I'm originally from the UK and I've been in South Africa now since about 2015. I'm sorry, I'm just gonna have to put these on, it's really bright here. So I'm currently sitting in the Southern African Wildlife College, which is at the edge of the Kruger National Park, actually open to the Kruger National Park itself. I am one of the trainers with Bushwise, and I'm also a volunteer for Rhino Revolution, which is one of the local NPOs around the Hoedspruit area of South Africa. And through Rhino Revolution, we do a huge amount of work, as you might imagine, with rhinos. And we also have done a lot of work with pangolins. So my role there is pretty varied. I get involved in absolutely everything from project managing through to fundraising, through to setting up all sorts of different projects, whether they be to save rhinos or pangolins. We also have an emergency rescue fund. So pretty much any species that needs our help is on the agenda.
Wow, okay. So I actually didn't realize how much you do outside of Bushwise, because you basically have two roles that you're running.
Oh yeah, no, two full-time jobs, absolutely. So my work for Rhino Revolution is a huge part of what I'm doing on a daily basis.
Nice. Okay, so I mean, obviously people can tell based on both of our accents that neither of us are originally from South Africa, and that's the thing that I think brings us both together in that passion. And so I just wanted to start, you know, now that you've introduced yourself, I want to go back in time a bit to
okay, great. Yeah, time machine.
What sort of inspired you? I mean, when you were a child, were you growing up around nature? Were you seeing it, or what was that moment for you? What was your childhood like, and how did you get into this initially?
Well, as far as I remember, I've always been obsessed with wildlife, but my mum likes to tell me a story of when I was at primary school. and there was the nativity play, and she was sitting in the audience, I think next to one of the teachers, and they're like, oh yeah, Sophie's about to come out in a minute with a goat. And I was like, with a goat? So obviously there's a goat in all good nativity plays. But yeah, and then my mum was like, no, she's terrified of goats, but no one had given me that memo. So, so I've just always been, so I wandered out with this enormous goat. But no, as far as I can remember, I've always loved nature. I've always been obsessed with wildlife. Like one of the first Christmas presents I can ever remember being given was an encyclopedia of animals of the world, which I still have. And because you will also discover throughout this conversation, I'm a little bit of like a nature nerd. That's sort of the category I affectionately put myself into. And I remember spending that whole Christmas day being like, it's very important that I get quick reference tabs to like key species. And by the end of the day, every single species in the book had its own little sticky note tab. So I think that if that explains it well enough, it's just something I've just always been obsessed with. Very, very soft-hearted as well. Any kind of indication that there's any cruelty going on towards animals, any kind of unpleasant behavior has always been something that really distresses me. In the UK, pretty much the only career that is kind of put forwards in those circumstances, oh, you should go and be a vet. And I think that would kill me, because whilst you're able to do very good work, a lot of it becomes very much a question of financials. So you can save an animal, but will people be happy to pay the veterinary costs? And you're constantly seeing animals that are not at their best. So they're ill, they're sick, they're injured. Quite a lot of the vets will do a huge amount of work, protecting animals that have been abused by humans. And that, I think, would just break me very, very quickly. So as a child, always obsessed with nature, went into a career in the law. So always been obsessed with nature and the idea of fairness and protecting things that can't necessarily speak or protect themselves. And then did a nice little segue from that into conservation.
But that's a whole thing. We've got to dive into that a little bit.
Sorry, this is what we got to talk about.
Law, and then I went straight into the next thing.
I've got 3 siblings. Growing up, fairness was something which was always very, very important to me. And both of my parents actually were lawyers. I don't think they particularly encouraged me to go into law. But as a child, my first career option that I wanted, which I was adamant for a number of years, was that I wanted to be a lion. And it took probably about 2 or 3 years for people to explain to me that that's not, no, you have to be born into that, which I thought was really unfair. And then, so I went from lion to I went to actress. I thought that would be really rather fabulous. And then my mum was like, do you know, that's going to be a pretty tough life. So let's have a backup career involved. And I was like, I figure law's probably fairly similar. That'll tick the fairness equation. A lot of people seem to be acting when they're in court, so that'll do. So I ended up going into law. I studied law at university. I did my year of law school. And then in the UK, similar to here, I think over here you call it articles. There's 2 years which you work for a law firm to finish off your training. And I successfully found the only animal-themed law firm in London. So I worked for Bird & Bird for 2 years. And was never particularly intending to stay in corporate law. My passion is what I would describe as bleeding hearts law. So anything which needs the law to protect it, which probably can't pay you to do so. So things like public international law governing refugee camps, animal rights, human rights, conservation, all of those sorts of things. That was really where my passion was. So I finished my legal studies. And then before I did my 2 years of articles, I convinced the firm to give me a year out, because I sort of said, listen, I don't know about you, but I wouldn't trust someone who's gone straight through education to qualifying to be able to give sensible advice. You've just got such a narrow window of experience to be looking at things from. So the firm gave me a year off. I worked for everything you can imagine. So that's where I did a bit of a stint at CNN. I met the Queen at one point. I called Prince Harry mate. So did a lot of events, hospitality. I worked for a global sort of oil and gas conglomerate. And then I did 2 months of traveling. And that's where I first found South Africa.
Yeah, I love how you just go straight through all of these life experiences and end up in South Africa. But I think it's something that speaks to a lot of, especially the international students, but even some of the South African students that choose to do field guiding, is you you have people have lots of interests, you know, and you kind of feel like you're bouncing all around. And I think that kind of somehow connects people who have passions for wildlife and conservation, is this constantly wandering, curious mind.
Yeah.
I mean, how old were you when you were a lawyer and then took that year off?
When did I first visit South Africa? That must have been 2013. So I was 23.
Okay. And how did you decide to come over to South Africa out of all places?
Oh, I've always been obsessed with the idea of South Africa. You know, the diversity that's here in terms of terrain, in terms of animals, in terms of history, has always been something that fascinated me. I traveled with one of my absolute best mates. You know, I think she's known me since I'm about 6 months old. And we did 3 weeks together. And then I did a week on top of that when she went back to the UK. But she also has got this fabulous palate and is very good at wines and stuff. So that's sort of crossed over a whole load of our interests. It's just somewhere I've always been fascinated by.
Yeah, and when you came over the first time, and since then, I suppose, have you gotten a chance to travel around to other countries, or has it mainly
Not
been
as
in
much as I'd like to. So the difficulty with South Africa is it is so incredible that it's hard to justify, once you're here, it's hard to justify the expense of going elsewhere because there's so much undiscovered and unexplored in this country itself. I mean, if you take an area of this landmass and you kind of drop it anywhere else in the world, you're likely to cross maybe 3, possibly 4, if you're lucky, different biomes. So areas specifically defined by their weather and climate with flora and fauna that's going to be very particular to that area. I mean, South Africa's got 9. So the diversity within this one country is stunning. I've been to Botswana, which I absolutely loved. You know, very different feel to South Africa, incredibly special. And I've got a huge number of countries on my lists of I would love to go and visit. But at the moment, it's a case of, I find in life, you're often either financially well off or well off with time. And very rarely do those two things coincide. So yeah, so lots of countries on the lists that I would love to absolutely dream to go and visit, a lot of the neighboring countries as well. But not so many that I've managed to really explore yet. I mean, I don't really count. Now, maybe I popped into the Capri Strip for a day, but I feel like that's probably, you know, it's not even tickling the surface, let alone scratching it.
I actually did the exact same thing. That's so funny. I was at Chobe River, and we were like, Namibia's right there.
Like,
you know,
right,
what would happen?
Yeah.
let's head over.
I was chasing a very rare bird that had been seen over there, and we managed to find, it's one of the lovebirds, and I managed to pop over the border. Didn't spot it, but had a day we sort of ran around looking at birds and then ran back over the border again.
That's cool though. That area of the world is just,
I mean,
that's the Capri Strip, that area. If you look at the Roberts Bird app and you're like, oh, where might that be found? It's always there. And it's like,
always there. Yeah.
That's where I gotta go. I gotta go spend like a month or 2 just sitting in it.
If anyone watching this just feels like maybe sponsoring me, you know, I'm currently playing the lottery, but you know, if anyone just feels like sponsoring me just to go and adventure and explore, I very happily will let you live vicariously through me. That would be great.
Sophie, that's not what this is about.
Oh, okay, sorry, right. This isn't the sponsorship, right? At the end, gotcha.
Wrong call, yeah. You're just so used to fundraising. Okay?
Yeah, exactly.
Have you been to all 9 of the biomes in South Africa at least?
Yes, I have. Which is pretty cool.
Ticked off that. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, some of them so minutely explored. And the problem is I find everywhere I've been in South Africa, with the exception of the cities, you know, I'm not really a city kind of gal. But everywhere I've been, it's a case of, wow, this wasn't enough time. I need to come back here. And then the next time you have off, it's the question of, okay, do you go back somewhere you've already been, or do you check out somewhere new? So I often use birds or insects for that. So if someone's seen something rare or unusual, then that'll just be the way that I choose the next target to visit.
Oh, that's a great thing. I mean, otherwise you could just have like a dartboard almost and just be like,
yeah, exactly. I mean, it's essentially the same thing.
Yeah, feels like there's just never enough time in the year to get. Where was the last place you went on your time off?
Well, my last time off I actually spent at home doing a lot of very boring admin, and then before that it was up Pafuri area.
Okay, that area is supposed to be beautiful. Can you maybe
tell? I drove up through the park and then outside the park there, and in that region you've got forests of baobab trees. So it's an incredibly special place to spend time.
I think maybe it would be useful, I'm realizing now, for the people who are listening, to get a bit more of a picture. I mean, you're at the Southern African Wildlife College campus, which is where we train field guides in collaboration with the Wildlife College. And your spitting distance of Kruger, you can practically see it. It's a 10-minute drive to the Orpen Gate. Maybe you could tell the listeners a bit about what that geography sort of looks like and where Pafuri is. I mean, you say it's in the north, but some people might never have seen Kruger or know what it's like.
So Kruger is an enormous, enormous park. I mean, I think the best way to describe it, it's approximately the same size in terms of hectareage as the country of Wales. So it's a pretty big area. It's fairly long and thin. It sits on the very northern hump of South Africa, and at the border with Zimbabwe and where is it going to be above us? So Mozambique and Zimbabwe. And it sits in a sort of long, narrow band that comes down that section of the country there. And then the Southern African Wildlife College, the Orpen Gate is almost smack in the middle of the Kruger Park. So on the one side, you've got the Mozambique border, and then the other side, you've got, in that middle section, you've got the Orpen Gate. And if you go to the very, very, very northern tip, so around the Pafuri area, you actually there's a Crook's Corner section, which is at the conjunction of Mozambique, Zimbabwe, and South Africa. And then that area just hugs the Zim border for a while.
Nice. Do you know why it's called Crook's Corner?
Yeah. With all of it used to be a hotspot for smuggling and poaching, and everyone just ran across the borders to avoid all of the authorities.
Wow, that's interesting. I can never remember the reason for that. That's cool. And so Pafuri, what interests you about Pafuri in particular?
I mean, Pafuri is, so like I said with South Africa, it's often a case, not necessarily that was my favorite place. It was just that there was something that I wanted to go and sort of see there. So the last time I was looking for a particular type of dung beetle called a Proagadurus rectificatus, which is stunning. This tiny little dung beetle with these incredible creations on the front of its head, which look almost like deer antlers. So that's why we sort of went up that way. But Pafuri is another beautiful area. It's the very tip of a lot of these migratory birds' routes. So it's often fantastic for birding. You've got the largest fever tree forest in the Southern Hemisphere that's up there as well. And like I said, outside of the park, these forests of baobabs, which are crazy, crazy things to see.
Yeah, those are incredible trees. I mean, it's some of those places is like, you feel like you're walking through a scene in Jurassic Park.
Oh
it's
yeah,
just
I mean, you can see the history there.
Yeah, that's incredible. Did you find the dung beetle when you went?
We did, which was really exciting. Lots of scraping through dung piles and finally a bit of success, but that's what makes it fun. If you could find it easily, it's not often so worth it.
Yeah, I might have to ask you for a photo of it, and then I can show it to everyone at the end of this chat if we can
Sure.
later on. Yeah. We can sort it out, because that'd be pretty cool to see, especially the description you give of the antlers.
No, it will not disappoint, guys. So just if you do want to stick around to the end of the chat just to see the dung beetle, don't blame you.
Just that. Well, how many different species of dung beetle are there?
Oh, I mean, across the world, I think the latest estimate is over 5,000. The latest count for South Africa was over 900, and there's constantly new ones being discovered and described. So it's quite a flexible number.
Nice. Do you know which one I have? I'm not sure.
Honestly, if I was going to guess, I'd say probably one of the Keppers.
Okay, and probably just something my tattoo artist Googled.
Yeah, exactly. Could be.
No, I think I found a photo somewhere, but okay, so you were talking about being a bleeding heart, and you had one of the things that I liked that you said earlier, and I think you said before to me, is you talk about getting into law in a sense because you wanted to be the voice for the voiceless, and you talked about animals. Do you think that that's, I mean, with the connection you have with pangolins and rhinos now, I mean, you're focusing on two highly threatened, traded within the illegal wildlife trade, heavily poached species. I mean, that must be a direct connection to that interest growing up, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think for me, one of the major drivers for me to actually actively get into conservation. So I'd been, supporting and following along with lots of conservation issues from the UK. And when I first visited as a tourist, one thing that majorly concerned me, almost everywhere that I stopped in South Africa, I was being presented with either a conservation issue that was nowhere on my radar, or even the ones that were on my radar, I was significantly behind the times of what was the reality of the situation on the ground. And that really concerned me. If there's someone who is actively motivated and interested in it, and they're not able to get an accurate picture of what's going on, then how on earth are you going to be changing these things? Because you need people who are mildly interested for it also to be flooding through their radar. So that concerned me quite heavily. And then it got to the stage where it's sort of attritional. So each place that you stopped, you'd either discover something else about one of the issues that that's very close to your heart, or things that you've never heard about before, and things that had never been on my radar for being particularly at risk. And I think one of the most confronting ones of those was giraffe. You know, estimates are that within less than 30 years, giraffe are no longer going to be with us in the wild. And I just sort of went, I don't want to live in that world. You know, I don't want to live in a world which has none of these incredible species, from the biggest to the tiniest, that are disappearing on our watch. And if I don't want to live in that world, if I don't want that reality to come about, then my life has to be about trying to stop that from happening. Is it successful? Who knows? You know, but if you don't try, then it's absolutely not going to make a difference. And if you don't try, then you can't afford to be upset or angry if it does happen. So that's sort of where the motivation to actively change from sort of law into a conservation direction. And a lot of people said, why didn't you just stick with the legal angle? And for me, I think one of the major lessons from that trip, and one of the major lessons for law and conservation in general, is that you need to be dealing with the reality of the situation. You know, I talk very often when I'm talking about conservation, talk about the ideal world and then the real world. And sure, in the ideal world, we would love people to be putting funding into conservation just because they love conservation, they want to save things. But actually, in this day and age, anyone who spends money often wants something back from it. Maybe it's the opportunity to participate in an experience, even if it's something as simple as news and updates. But no one really just gives something for nothing. And one of the sort of the balances of that was, right, if I want this to happen, then I need to put something in to be making it happen. So that sort of really pushed me from changing from law to conservation. And I think, and I don't know, you know, I'd love to hear your experiences on this, but moving from the UK to South Africa has not been easy. You are constantly, it's a constant battle, a constant fight and struggle with the home affairs and the visas and all this, that, and the other. And one of the elements of that I think helped me to get to where I am today was that strength of belief and conviction in what I wanted to be doing. You know, if you're sort of, oh, yeah, that might be nice, you're not going to cut it, because you really have to be putting everything you have on the line to be able to make it happen. And having something you think is worthwhile doing makes that possible.
Okay, cool. So have you ever thought about going back into law on this side and getting involved in that here? Or
I think the closest thing that I would do, you know, the difficulty with law, I think that's where I was and I got a bit distracted. Sorry about that, wandering mind. The difficulty with law is that you can't do it in a vacuum. So sitting in a nice, you know, air-conditioned office somewhere, applying very intelligent solutions to problems that are on the ground is not going to work, because what you need to do is have experience on the ground to understand why are things the way that they are. Not how are they, but what are the issues which are meaning that people are doing something one way rather than a way that's better for the environment or for the different species within it? What are the pressures that they are facing, and how do you alleviate those pressures? From a legal side of things, often there's really good regulations in place. The framework is there, but why is it not being enforced? What are the impracticalities there? So being on the ground was much more important than being in an office. I think the way that I would see law contributing in the future is I'd like to use the skills I've developed as there's a section of law that's known as dispute resolution, and that does everything from the courts through to mediation, arbitration, all of the different alternative methods that you can use to try and get parties to come together and to find a common ground. And I think that is what conservation needs. There are so many different nonprofit organizations out there and charities out there. And like I was saying, often to get into this, it's because you have to have quite a strong personality or an incredibly strong conviction in something that needs to be done. And the difficulty with that is that often those personalities don't play well with others. So you've got a lot of very disparate charities that might be all going for the same goal. And instead of having one accessible pot of money, which allows you to do very impressive things, it's then separated into lots of different areas, and different methods are being used. So I think that I would like to get to a stage where I'm able to help different NPOs work together and collaborate together in a way that is successful and enjoyable for both of them. I think that's when you're going to start to be seeing some real impact being made, and that's probably the best use of that legal training that I had.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, the comment around funding, it's something that I think I mean, that I know everyone that works in the conservation sphere feels, and it's not just conservation, anything to do with wildlife. I mean, if you get to, you know, organized crime globally, wildlife crime is huge, but it ends up being, and it's getting some of the smallest amount of funding to solving those problems. I mean, I know that in the UK, there are a few big royal organizations that are involved in illegal wildlife trade and research, and leading a lot of efforts in that, following the money and the
Yeah.
other crimes that are going on to see. I mean, I'm sure with the rhino revolution, looking at rhinos and pangolins, and I don't want to get too into what can probably be a very sensitive space, but maybe you could speak a bit about the way that that organization is working to protect both of those species and what kind of things they're doing.
So it's really varied. And I think, you know, just like you're saying there, Annie, one of the most important things for people to understand is that we are dealing with crime syndicates. So very often the same individuals and organizations that are smuggling drugs into the country are funding poaching operations and smuggling the proceeds of the poaching out of the country as well. So, you know, we're dealing with sophisticated individuals with incredible access to funding of their own. So these are not usually people who don't have access to technology. These are not usually inexperienced individuals. And then you have this enormous pyramid that comes with it. So a lot of the individuals that are actually caught in a poaching operation are individuals who may never have poached before. You know, there might be someone who has just been pulled in because they happen to know that particular area, they can follow tracks, whatever it might be. And very often these are the individuals that we're able to catch. And a lot of people get very, very upset and frustrated at the very limited prison sentences or the ridiculous bail options that are awarded to these individuals. And it really, the important thing for people to understand is that often those individuals are used to try and follow up the chain to get the guys who are actually running and managing these operations, who don't care what happens to the guys on the ground. So when we actually are able to capture some of the individuals that are higher up the chain, that's when you see these. We had some recent really wonderful to see the community coming together, big protests through Hoodspray recently. We had some of the kingpins that were sort of actually caught in an operation, and then going to campaign at the courts to say, no, these individuals, like we can't be giving bail to these individuals. We now need to be making an example of. So very, very sensitive, as you can imagine. In terms of what we do as an organization, it's really varied. So one of the sort of founding principles of Rhino Revolution was basically to try and help with the rhino poaching crisis. The epicenter of that crisis is very often seen as being in the Lowveld, which is where I am. And so we do everything from fundraising to support veterinary operations if there's been a suspected poaching attack in an area. We support horn trimming, so when you actually then take off the end of the horn and then it will eventually regrow. We support monitoring operations. We support anti-poaching patrols. From a pangolin side of things, we do a huge amount of research. So we've got, previously we had an orphanage and we've moved away from that side of things. We're trying to move less towards focusing on one individual and more towards focusing on the entire sort of population. So we still support other orphanage facilities, but we don't actually have any, we have facilities of our own at the moment. So we do a lot of research in terms of trying to learn more about these animals in the wild. You know, a huge problem that we're facing is that there is such limited research that's actually been done on pangolins that when you have one that is ready to be re-released, we don't even have accurate statistics for what is typical behavior in the wild to be able to be charting against how the progress is of rehabilitated individuals. So we're involved with a project which is trying to set up a global DNA database for pangolins using pangolin scat, which is having a few hiccups. Pangolin scat is pretty tricky to find. They've been training scent dogs from one of the rehabilitation facilities on the scat from the pangolins there, and then they took the scent dogs out very proudly, and the dogs just went and found a load of ant nests.
Nice.
Yeah, you know, hiccups here and there, but the idea behind that is then any pangolin seized from the trail, a global data map, we can actually chart where it's originated from, which hopefully will maximize the success of rehabilitation and re-release, and also will help us to see where poaching hotspots are, so we can be targeting and focusing efforts and attention on areas that are really needed. We support the Wildlife College. We've got a fundraiser at the moment for aerial patrols. So a lot of the time, actually just being able to survey an area first of all, acts as a fantastic deterrent, but also allows us to be as quick as possible on the tail of any poachers that might have been in the area, and to get veterinary treatment if it's possible to animals that might have been injured by humans. Our mantra is reimagine, revalue, and restore, and that's specifically for rhinos. You know, we believe that we need to be looking at this from a point of view of in terms of from local communities and from South Africans. Rhinos are part of their natural heritage, and we need to be finding a way to be changing the perspectives of people on rhinos, giving them an inherent value in them being alive, and then restoring their populations to the appropriate numbers. So that's a lot of the work we're doing, and we've got various projects where we're trying to look at concepts of community ownership over rhinos, to really help to build that as a model. I won't go too much into that because it gets quite complicated. Yeah. And we also have a wing which focuses a huge amount, as you can imagine, on education. So education is key, and we talk about trying to build the conservationists of tomorrow, or conservationists of the future, because it's all very well and good fighting the fires that are on the ground at the moment, but if we're not changing the perspectives and the attitudes of people who are going to be in charge in the next 5-10 years, then we're doomed to failure. You know, we're always going to be on this very short-term success solution. So probably a little bit long-winded there, but as you can imagine, it's a huge part of what I do. It's something that I take great pride in, and takes a lot of conservation, as I know that you'll be aware, is this beautiful roller coaster of emotions, the highs and the lows. But yeah, so that's a little tiny glimpse into the window of what we do as an organization.
I mean, it's just such a great example of what you were speaking about before, about your interest in fostering collaboration between organizations and individuals that are invested and interested in conservation, because you're just taking one example of one species. Okay, two, but how many people you just now mentioned, all of the different actors involved. It's not like get an anti-poaching unit out there and you've solved the problem with the rhino. You know, you're talking about, first of all, you're talking about a massive landscape. Like you said, Kruger is 2 million hectares. It's huge. And then you've got, you know, communities. Obviously, we want to get involved. Africa has a booming youth population, so getting young people invested and interested in the conservation of these species is, like you say, huge. Then you've got the conservation canines that need to be trained. You've got the legal side. You've got legislation, you've got government investment, you've got the different provinces going on. I mean, if you just, it can, like you said, be very quickly, very overwhelming. So you have to have the gut for it, right? Yeah. I mean, you have to be able to harden yourself with it.
Everything goes wrong. There's days when projects you've been working on for months and months and months just suddenly turn from being almost a success to an absolute failure in sort of a 24-hour window. And you need to have the strength to stand up, brush yourself off, and get back to the drawing board. And I think that, you know, for me, nothing is impossible in this world. I refuse to believe that. It's just that we haven't tried the right method of working out what it is yet. So there's huge successes as well. But yeah, you need to have a thick skin to work in conservation.
Yeah. I mean, and that's kind of what we're talking about in this webinar series. You know, the Wild Insights, the premise behind it is exploring the different options of conservation. And obviously we have a list on our website of the different kinds of jobs you could go into if you did a Bushwise course and it was just your introduction to conservation and wildlife. But I mean, it's huge. I mean, and you could have a career that's not directly connected to conservation, but does actually have a foot in the door with those activities, because there's so many different pieces to that puzzle.
100%. And I think one of the most important things for people to realize is that everything that they are doing has the potential to have an impact. It doesn't matter if you're working for a supermarket in the UK or wherever you might be. You know, you have the opportunity to be raising awareness, to be actually sponsoring an organization, a species. And I do believe, you know, it's a really tricky thing with conservation. I really feel in order to make an impact and for an impact to be felt, you need to pick your cause and you've got to run with it. And you've got to be strong enough to believe. There's so many valid and valuable causes out there. You know, you can't say that one is better or more worthy than another. You just have to say, okay, this is what I'm going to be fighting for, and I've got enough faith that there's someone else who's fighting for the other ones. But it is whatever you're doing, you have the potential to be making an impact, and I think that's a really key thing for people to understand, especially as you get more advanced in whatever career it is that you choose. You really have an opportunity to change the whole attitude of your team, your organization, and just make conservation part of the daily conversation. You know, it's something which I think it is becoming more and more discussed and talked about, and people are definitely generating greater awareness, especially as the awareness of the climate situation really climbs. But it's something which you can never talk about enough.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so you did your field guide course with Bushwise a few years ago. We won't say when, we'll just say a few years ago. And now you're training with Bushwise. So maybe you could talk a bit about how becoming a field guide itself, like that experience, can help with the search for a career in conservation or wildlife, or how that can be sort of a stepping stone in that process.
So I think I had a slightly strange journey where I did my field guiding qualifications prior to being a Bushwise, and then so my Bushwise experience got to be, by the time I was there, I was 110% convinced that this is what I wanted to be doing. And I used that experience to build on the different qualifications that I had, and to really make sure that I would be able to get a foot in the door of the industry, which I think is what Bushwise does so well for its students. And one of the lovely things about Bushwise is that you're not limited to just one type. It's not just lodge placements that are offered. You have placements where you're able to be involved with volunteering organizations, research organizations. In terms of conservation itself, you know, that's a tricky one, because when you start to boil it down, where does one career start and where's the next one end? And in terms of what we offer to our students, you know, becoming a field guide gives you a fundamental understanding of animal behavior and habitat requirements. And I think what it does the most is, you know, we do a huge amount of educating our students about the links that happen out here, and how everything in nature is this beautiful, seamless puzzle. And with that puzzle, how everything fits next to one another, and how actually everything contributes to what's happening around itself. And I think that that knowledge and understanding is fundamental to be working in conservation, because even though you might be focused on this one species, you need to be understanding what other species are liable to be affecting it, and what's going to happen to the other species if this one does disappear. So that's what I would say is probably the most important, like, direct education relating to the conservation. But whatever career option you choose to go into following a course like this, your ability to have a far-reaching impact is incredible. You know, as a field guide, you are sharing life experiences with people that they may well talk about years, maybe even decades after the event. I was chatting to one of the other trainers the other day, and we were sort of having a laugh and saying, oh, I wonder how many people's walls we're on in our houses. Because, you know, it's a really beautiful thing. It's so lovely when you hear from a past guest, but these are people you might have met for 2 days, 5 days, whatever their length of stay was. And you stay in touch for years and years after that. And these people are spread all over the globe, all over South Africa, all over Africa itself, in a huge range of different careers. And your impact that you make on them, the domino effect that is held within that cannot be underestimated. You know, I've had people who have been strategists for global companies that have said, listen, I've made my money, and now I want to give back, and I want to give you my expertise, my years of training as a strategist, to try and help tackle some of the problems that you're facing. And that is where the sort of collaboration really makes a fundamental difference.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so much more of a conversation now too. I think that the world is sort of getting increasingly small just based on the way we're all connected. Those opportunities present themselves more readily now, and it's just about making those conversations happen and bringing people together.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. And you must have a diverse group of students there right now, because at the Wildlife College, you also have international. So do you have anybody, you don't have to say names, but do you have anyone who will be probably going back to their home country or doing something different, not going into field guiding? Must have some diversity in what people are looking at doing.
So I think most of the students who are on course at the moment are very motivated to be field guides. We do have a couple of the students who have come into the course saying they don't know if they want to go into field guiding or if they want to go into conservation. They want to use this 6 months to really try and assess that. And I think that one of the best things that Bushwise does is the offering of the placement as well, because that really gives students the chance to have that first experience in an industry, to say, oh, do you know what, actually, yeah, I can see how this is going to work for me. And one of the things about guiding is that every single guide will have a different style. There's no right or wrong style. There's sort of ethical and unethical guiding, but no right or wrong style of guiding. And so the way that each person will find their journey or their route into whatever it is that they're interested in, hopefully conservation, will be different. But that placement gives the students the opportunity to actually try it almost, if I can say, it's sort of like risk-free, you know. A lot of the legwork is done for them. It's, you know, we're able to sort of guide them towards an organization that hopefully will be a great fit with their personality, their interests. And then they can use that as an opportunity to really drill down into, is this what I'm wanting to be doing?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I don't want to keep you too long because I think we've already been chatting for almost 40 minutes, but I would be remiss to not ask, because in one of the blogs that you've written before, you call yourself the purveyor of the dad joke.
Oh yeah.
Do you have any dad jokes for us?
Oh, this is a great question. I'll give you a guiding dad joke. There's so many. We could do a whole talk call just on these. But it's a really interesting thing, actually. Did you know that at any drink stop, doesn't matter if it's a coffee stop or a sundowner stop, there's always at least one bird that's there. Do you know what it is? It's the swallow. That's a good one. That's a favorite one. I'm also drinking coffee, so it works.
Yeah, exactly. Speaking of, well, let me actually join you there. Okay. Now, last thing is, what's the rest of the week? You've got the weekend coming up. What does the rest of your week look like? What's on the schedule?
So we've punished the students this week. They've had their Fugaza theory exam, so it's now done and out of the way. And then last night we had a sleep out, which typically does not involve a lot of sleeping. So it's one of these, there's no tents, you take your sleeping bags and roll mats and you lie down underneath the stars, which is pretty beautiful. But today the students have got a bit of time to rest and recover. They need to complete their Fugaza workbooks over the weekend. And then we've got a couple of classroom sessions where we're going to be tackling bird calls, amphibian calls, different slides that they need to be learning as well. So lots of different info that's coming at them. And then next week is all about the practical drives. So everything that they've been learning is going to be brought out, teased out of them with a lot of sort of guiding skills and techniques thrown on the top as well.
That's awesome. I remember how stressful it was building up to the practical assessment and drives, and doing for the first time speaking in front of a vehicle full of your peers. It's intimidating.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's something about that front seat that's just terrifying, that nobody enjoys. But yeah, this will be the students' first time having a full 3 hours to themselves as the driver. So we're really excited to see what they come up with.
Nice. That's exciting. Well, I mean, by the time, so obviously we've recorded this a little bit early for the actual presentation. So by the time we have this webinar call, the students will have done it. So I'll have to give everyone an update on how everyone did.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Let you know how many vehicles we have left.
Yeah, how many tires made it through.
Yeah, exactly.
Awesome, Sophie. Well, I could talk to you, as you know, and I can and I do, for hours and hours and hours on end. I'm sure we're going to have tons of questions about pangolins. I didn't even ask you to describe what one looks like, but we'll get in. I can get into that with everybody.
So I did a masterclass for the online students the other day about pangolins, and I think I ran out of time. I think we got stopped.
Yeah, that's what happened with the wild dog chat too. That's how it goes. Yeah. But I'll let people know if they have any burning questions that they can reach out to you, and they can also ask me. Yeah. But thank you so much for joining me, and we'll chat soon.
Absolute pleasure, Annie. Always lovely to chat. Yeah, catch up soon.
Cool. All right, thanks everyone for tuning in to the first webinar. We don't have any questions popping up in the Q&A, but I did get one or two sent to me directly. So just to, someone asked what Sophie's role is with Bushwise. I don't know if I necessarily explained that one initially. So Sophie is one of our trainers. So Bushwise has two different campuses. We've got one at the Wildlife College right next to Kruger, and then one in the Greater Makalali Game Reserve in Mshlashla. They're both only an hour away or so from Hoodspray. And Sophie's one of our trainers at the SAUC campus. If you are on social media at all, there are often videos of those trainers talking and explaining different things in the field to the students. And Sophie has just always been an extremely enigmatic personality. She's great at explaining things in a very interesting and engaging way, as you obviously saw. And of course, we can get a little bit carried away with the conversation, but she's just such an interesting person with that kind of background. So if you're coming from a background where you have no interest in or have no experience in conservation or wildlife, and you're just looking to get involved in it, this is definitely one way to do it. We're hoping to run these webinars more regularly. The next one we're planning on doing will likely be a conversation with a man who's involved in big cat research. In fact, now he's focused on leopards and travels to and from Saudi Arabia, often for his work. So he's probably going to be our next guest. We take recommendations and requests from people all the time, so please send me a message if you know someone or are interested in hearing from someone who's involved in conservation, then we can loop them into these Wild Insight chats. Ideally, the conversations will be live, and we're always here to take questions. My email address and everything will be shared with the group through the video that will be shared afterwards for everyone who attended and couldn't make it. So thank you again from my side, and I hope to see you at the next one.